Hey guys, and welcome back. First of all, I want to say thanks for all the support that last week's video got. We got the most likes that we've ever received on a video last week. I think we got nearly 90 likes, so we're really appreciative of that. And also, for all the people that subscribed, I think we got over 100 new subscribers during last week. So again, thanks for that. If you're looking to subscribe to get notifications of when these pick videos get released, you can hit the subscribe button to get notifications for that. And also, if you're looking for pick articles or just more in-depth analysis and picks beyond just what we talk about in this video, you can head over to stumpthespread.com and get a free account or a premium pick account over there. And if you're on desktop, then you can just click right here where the Stump the Spread logo is, and it'll take you right to the website. At Stump the Spread, we do more than just college football. We also do the NFL, NHL, NBA, and here upcoming with the college basketball season. Also, I'm going to be releasing college basketball daily videos unless there's just some reason that I can't do it for any particular reason. Those should pretty much be coming out every day once the college basketball season rolls around, so I'm pretty excited for that. Also, if you want a list of all the games that I'm going to be talking about in this video, that's going to be in the description, and I'll also link stumpthespread.com in the description of this video as well if you're looking for a link to get over there. Alright, so I have a pretty long list of games that I'm going to be talking about. Pretty much it's just going to be like the other videos where I talk about all of the weekday games, and then I'm just going to do, kind of a large handful of the games on Saturday. So, pretty long list of games here that I want to be talking about, so let's just get right into it. First we have Eastern Michigan at Ball State. Eastern Michigan has definitely looked better this year than people were expecting, and this is actually one of the better years the Eagles are having as a football team. Obviously, they've had some pretty rough years over the past couple decades, but the Eagles have looked like they're falling back a bit as of late, and this will be a good test for them on the road going against Ball State. With Riley Neal being questionable, that makes Ball State a little less attractive, and that's why this has gone from -4 to -1. It's definitely worth kind of holding off and seeing the actual status on Riley Neal if he's able to go or not, but we might not get that information prior to the game, so it's just going to be one of those wait and see kind of things. Ball State hasn't been having all that much success in conference, just getting one conference win thus far, and with their quarterback kind of being questionable, we're going to be cautiously siding here with Eastern Michigan on the road, even though the Eagles have looked like they're taking a slight step back. With the question marks surrounding Riley Neal and also the fact that Ball State has only been able to pick up one conference win thus far, we're going to be siding with the Eagles to get back on track here and cover the spread. Going down to our other Tuesday game, we got Western Michigan against Kent State. Western Michigan has been consistently dominating opponents in the MAC, but perhaps going back-to-back on the road will affect them here, even though there really hasn't been much that's affected the Broncos this year. They've been pretty consistent in taking down their MAC competition, whether it's been at home or on the road. And then you got Kent State, who's been actually a little better than expected this year. This is a Kent State squad that was projected to be one of the worst teams in the FBS, but they've actually been semi-respectable. But also coming out of the weaker MAC East, we're just not as, obviously, we don't have as much respect for the teams in the MAC East compared to the MAC West, especially at this point in the year. So we're going to be riding with Western Michigan. They really haven't given us a reason to think that they won't be able to win another game in blowout fashion, and you can already see this has been bet up from -18.5 already to up to 3 touchdowns here, so the public is definitely feeling more confidence right now in the Broncos. Alright, so moving on to Wednesday's games, we got Toledo versus Northern Illinois. So Toledo has largely lived up to their expectations this year. This is a squad that was expected to compete right at the top of the MAC with Western Michigan, and that's been the case. Toledo's been a little less consistent with their results than they would like, and part of that's had to do with some defensive deficiencies that they've had, but the offense continues to put up some pretty strong numbers, which is a good sign, and Toledo did look pretty strong in their last outing. And then you have Northern Illinois, who was another squad that was supposed to kind of compete up in the upper tier of the MAC, but that just hasn't been the case for this squad. They've been struggling, obviously getting off to a really slow start in the non-conference, not being able to pick up a non-conference win has really affected this group's overall record, and dealing with some injuries throughout the year has also affected the Huskies, but they're a little more healthy coming into this one on their home field. With that said, we're still higher on the Rockets right now and think that this Toledo offense should be able to outpace Northern Illinois even on the road. And the fact that this one's gone from over a touchdown to under a touchdown, we have just a little bit more confidence right here with the Rockets. And then our other Wednesday game, we got Bowling Green against Akron. This is a matchup over in the MAC East. Akron's been a really tough team to figure out this year. They've shown some pretty impressive offensive performances, but they've just been a little less consistent than we like to see out of a team. And then you have Bowling Green State, who's actually been a pretty strong performer in the MAC in recent years, but they've really fallen off and had a tough time finding any kind of wins this year. Akron getting back to their home field, we think that's really going to help boost this squad. And going from minus 11.5 right now, it's at minus 8.5. That feels like Akron has been bet down to the point where they have the better betting value at this point. Moving on to Thursday's games, we have the rivalry game of North Carolina versus Duke. So Duke, obviously their overall record isn't all that impressive, but the Blue Devils have actually been able to compete really closely with some of the better teams in the ACC, which is actually kind of impressive. And that's been a lot hinged on the Duke defense, which has actually been pretty strong. On the other side of the ball, obviously Duke hasn't been as consistent, and a lot of that has to do with their starting quarterback Thomas Sirk being out. We've been really high on this North Carolina squad this year, and they've come through for us quite a bit, and especially on the road, North Carolina has performed really, really well this year. And we just don't foresee this Duke offense being able to hang with North Carolina, even in this rivalry game where, you know, anything can happen in rivalry games is the saying, but we do still feel like North Carolina giving the points is the better value bet. All right, so we got two more games here on Thursday, starting with Louisiana Lafayette and Georgia Southern. So Lafayette's star running back Jalen Nix is out, which isn't so great. And then you have Georgia Southern's QB Kevin Ellenson, which is listed as probable, so that's a good sign for Georgia Southern. Obviously, the Eagles not having the kind of success this year that they've had in recent years, but this is still a dangerous team. And actually, their defense has been pretty good this year, even though their offense has taken quite a significant step back. And we're actually, you know, a little confused as to why the Eagles have taken such a large step back this year on the offensive side of the ball, because they still have quite a few weapons to deploy with their triple option attack. Getting back to their home field, you can see, obviously, the betting public has lost some confidence in Georgia Southern given the results that they've had this year, but the Eagles were able to push Ole Miss last week on the road, which was a pretty good result for them going against an SEC team that's better than Ole Miss's record would suggest. Getting this one bet down to about minus 8 points right now, we feel like Georgia Southern is the better value bet here going against this Louisiana Lafayette squad that we really don't have all that much confidence in. And then the nightcapper on Thursday, we have Utah versus Arizona State. We've been really high on this Utah squad this year and feel like they've kind of been overlooked largely, both by the pollsters and Vegas. And then you have Arizona State here, who kind of opened up the year stronger than people were expecting, and they've kind of been more floundering as of late over the past month in the Pac-12. But Arizona State has, without a doubt, played their best ball this year on their home field behind their home crowd advantage. And it's worth noting, Manny Wilkins looks like he's going to be able to play in this one, and that really gives Arizona State a boost. Even though we really like this Utah squad going on the road into a tough environment, this just feels like a little too many points to be laying, especially with a Utah offense that can be a bit hit or miss given the fact that their quarterback isn't the most accurate thrower. So a lot of the Utah offense tends to rely pretty heavily on their talented ground game. They got some pretty talented backs there, but when you're more of a one-dimensional offense, that kind of limits what you're able to do sometimes. So Arizona State getting the home field advantage here, we're going to be taking them with the points as the better value bet here. All right, moving on to Friday, we have Boston College versus Florida State as the only Friday game. Florida State going against one of the toughest schedules in the country this year. Obviously, they've had some success, but more often than not, they've been coming up short in those tougher matchups. But here, Florida State gets to go against one of the weaker teams in the ACC, and we've been pretty low on this Boston College team all year, given the fact that we knew the Eagles were going to take a big step back on the defensive side of the ball. And even though they have been slightly better offensively, this group just isn't nearly as scary defensively as they were in 2015. It's really going to come down to how focused Florida State comes into this one on this Friday night matchup. We do think that Florida State has the kind of offense to really pull away from Boston College, and the Eagles have been pretty consistently dominated by the upper tier teams in the ACC this year, and we expect that to continue for the Eagles here on the road. So we like the Seminoles here, giving the points. All right, so moving on to Saturday's games. The first game on Saturday that I want to talk about is Pittsburgh versus Clemson. So the Clemson Tigers, they've obviously been able to stay undefeated, which is really great for them. Obviously, they got pretty lucky in their win over NC State, but since then, Clemson was able to get past Florida State on the road, and then the Tigers really completely dominated Syracuse last week, which was one of the more impressive blowout results that the Tigers have had this year. Clemson not quite as consistent on the offensive side of the ball from the start of the year to this point as you'd like to see out of the team that's one of the runaway favorites to reach the college playoff, but this group did look really strong last week, and that's a good sign coming into this one against a Pittsburgh defense that has taken a huge step back this year. Pittsburgh has one of the weaker defenses in the ACC, which is really crazy considering head coach Narduzzi is really known for his defensive coaching ability, so kind of surprising to see that out of the Panthers this year, but given the Pittsburgh's defensive deficiencies that we've been seeing, we think that Clemson giving just under 3 touchdowns here on their home field is the better way to go. And also keep an eye out on Deshaun Watson's status. Obviously, if it doesn't look like he's going to be able to go, then don't take Clemson. But if he's looking like he's going to be performing at a typical Deshaun Watson level, then the Tigers seem like the better value bet here. Moving down to Ohio State versus Maryland. Ohio State bounced back in a huge way last week, absolutely demolishing a pretty decent Nebraska squad. We're not as high on Nebraska as a lot of people are, but nonetheless, Ohio State looked amazing and much more like the team people had come to expect. And then you have Maryland, who's coming off a blow-off defeat on the road against Michigan in their last outing, and that should kind of give Ohio State a boost here as the Buckeyes want to prove that they're just as dominant of a team as Michigan, which means that they'll be looking to deal out similar kind of punishment here to Maryland. So we're going to be siding with Ohio State, giving the points on the road. And, sitting right at 4 touchdowns seems fair, but if it gets over 4 touchdowns, we wouldn't like Ohio State quite as much. But given how dominant the Buckeyes looked last week, we're going to be siding with them here, giving the points. All right, so now to talk about Penn State versus Indiana. Penn State has really been rallying in the positive direction over the past few weeks, and that all started with their upset win at home against Ohio State a while back. And then you have Indiana, who's, they have a respectable level of play, but they don't always necessarily play up to their expectations consistently. This is an Indiana team that has an offense that has the ability to put up some pretty strong numbers, but they've been a little less consistent than they would like to be. With that said, Indiana has a decent home field advantage, and with this spread going from -5 now creeping towards a touchdown, if you're getting the full touchdown here, Indiana feels like the better value bet. Even though Penn State has been looking a lot better as of late, we're still not completely sold on the Nittany Lions and think that, this team wasn't looking all that impressive back in the earlier part of the year, and it's just hard to forget that with this Nittany Lions squad. But with that said, we still like the Hoosiers, and especially if it's at a full touchdown, then they definitely feel like the better value bet here on their home field. All right, moving down to Wake Forest versus Louisville. Wake Forest actually has one of the better defenses in the ACC, and their defense would rank even higher if their offense wasn't as anemic as it can be sometimes. And then you have Louisville, who's shown that they can really dominate an opponent, but they've also shown that they can play more competitive games against teams that you wouldn't necessarily think that they would play competitive against, like in their matchup against Duke and a couple weeks ago against Virginia. Those were 2 games that the Cardinals were actually in danger of losing, surprisingly. But it just goes to show that this Louisville squad is a little bit hit or miss, and that has to do with the inconsistencies more so of their defense, because their offense has pretty much been dominating on a weekly basis. But Louisville is going against a slightly better defense here than they typically will go against in the ACC. And with this one popping up to 5 full touchdowns, we do feel like Wake Forest has the slightly better betting edge here, even on the road. So Moving down to the Tulsa-Navy game, this is a pretty intriguing matchup. You have a Tulsa offense that's really been showing consistent strength all year, both through the air and on the ground, and being so dangerous on both phases of the offense really makes this an incredibly difficult team to defend. And I think that Tulsa should be able to pretty much almost name their score here against a Navy defense that's, probably mid-tier in terms of the AAC. And then you have Navy, whose triple option offense can be really tricky to slow down, and we're not all that high on Tulsa's defense either, so Navy should also be able to have a lot of success on the offensive side of the ball. You can see that the betting has more favored Tulsa here, with Navy starting at -3 and now Tulsa being almost a -3 favorite. We've been really high on this Tulsa squad all year, and they've come through for us on a pretty consistent basis. But we've also been impressed with what Navy's been able to do this year without Tago Smith, their starting QB, who went down with an injury earlier in the year. With that said, we do value Tulsa's offense over Navy's offense slightly, and these defenses are more comparable. So even though this is on the road, we will be siding with Tulsa here, giving the points as the better value bet, especially with Navy coming off such an emotional win last week against Notre Dame. It might be a little tougher for this squad to refocus their efforts coming into this really tricky matchup against the Golden Hurricane. All right, moving on. The next game that I have written down here is Texas Tech versus Oklahoma State. These teams are somewhat similar given the fact that they both lean on their offenses, while both of their defenses have shown some deficiencies this year, and obviously that's even more so the case with Texas Tech on the defensive side of the ball. The Red Raiders have really just been quite terrible defensively, even though their offense ranks as one of the best in the nation in scoring average as well as passing yards. And then you have Oklahoma State, who's been showing some good signs lately, but this does feel like an awful lot of points to give against an offense like Texas Tech's. So saying that, we do feel like getting the points in the Red Raiders is the slightly better value play here, even though the Cowboys are trending in the right direction. And given the fact that we really do not like this Texas Tech defense, but we do have enough confidence in the Texas Tech offense that getting this many points feels like the slightly better value play here. All right, so moving on here, the next game we got is Wyoming versus UNLV. We've been really high on this Wyoming squad since the start of the year, and we're really happy to see that they've been not just living up to the expectations we had for them, but actually quite thoroughly surpassing them. Wyoming's coming off a recent home win against Boise State, which was huge for their program, and then last week, even though the Cowboys did look a little shaky at times in the third quarter, they were able to pull away in the end and really dominate Utah State, pulling away and getting that blowout win. So that was another nice result for Wyoming, who's in control of their own destiny to reach the Mountain West Conference title game, which is really great for them. And they also have that cushion on Boise State with the head-to-head matchup win. And then you have UNLV, who's continuing their rebuild. Maybe not having quite the success that they were hoping to have this year, but still, playing at a respectable level in the Mountain West Conference nonetheless. But then you also have Johnny Stanton out for UNLV at quarterback. Wyoming's just been doing so great for us against the spread all season. It's really hard to formulate a case to go against this squad. You can see this has gone from a full touchdown to just over a touchdown, which isn't ideal. But given what we've been seeing out of Wyoming, we're still going to take the Cowboys here, giving the points on the road as the better value bet. Moving down to another Mountain West Conference matchup, we have Colorado State versus Air Force. Colorado State, they opened the year with that awful performance on national TV against rival Colorado, and people just kind of thought of the Rams as an afterthought after that point. And Colorado did struggle kind of earlier on in the year, but they have been better in conference and quietly been putting together some pretty respectable results in the Mountain West Conference. And then you have Air Force, who opened the year strong, and then they kind of fell off as soon as conference play started. But the Falcons have been better, picking up back-to-back wins in recent weeks, and then last week, obviously getting by rival Army on the road in a pretty significant fashion was pretty great for this Air Force squad's overall confidence. We see that this spread has gone down from -6 to -4, and that gives Air Force kind of the nod for us here as the better betting value, especially on their home field. All right, so now going over to the SEC, we have Mississippi State against Alabama. Mississippi State coming off that strong home win against Texas A&M, even though there is an asterisk next to that result given the fact that Texas A&M was playing a large portion of that game without their star quarterback, Trevor Knight. And then you have Alabama, who's pretty much just been taking care of business on a weekly basis, and that's just what you expect from a team that's coached as well as the Crimson Tide, as well as given all of the talent that the Tide have on both sides of the ball. Alabama does have, they have these games where they give a lot of points against teams that they should be able to beat significantly, and then, they kind of pull their foot off the gas in the second half and give the other team a chance at the backdoor cover, which is always a little stressful, but we do think that Alabama has enough momentum, coming off the really great result on the road against LSU last week defensively, that they should be able to hold the Bulldogs to minimal scoring and get just enough points on the board here to cover this rather large spread. North Texas versus Western Kentucky. This should be a pretty interesting matchup over in Conference USA. Western Kentucky has proven to be one of the elite teams in Conference USA again this year, even with changing out quarterbacks after Brandon Doty obviously moving on this past offseason, but still being one of the more potent offensive units in the conference. And then you have North Texas, who came into the year, many thought that they would be one of the worst teams in the FBS, but that hasn't been the case for the Mean Green, who's actually been pretty respectable and have actually been performing quite consistently above expectations on a weekly basis. That's part of the reason we see this spread going from -30 to -28. And then you also might have some people that aren't really so happy with Western Kentucky last week, given the fact that they had a huge lead against Florida International and they gave up 2 late touchdowns to barely not cover the spread, and that has to have a lot of Hilltopper backers a bit salty about that. So that's probably another reason why this spread has gone down a bit. But even at the full 2 touchdowns, we feel like the Mean Green have the slightly better betting value here, probably needing about 2 to 3 touchdowns to have a really good shot at getting this cover, which we think that North Texas should be able to do. So this is one of the top group of 5 games that we have on the board this week, with Appalachian State going against Troy, 2 of the best teams from the Sun Belt. I'm actually really looking forward to watching this matchup. I'm pretty excited about it. Troy has way surpassed expectations this year. Many thought that the Trojans would be taking a step forward this year, but nobody really thought or gave Troy a chance at, strongly pushing for the conference title. And then you have Appalachian State, who came into the year as one of the strong favorites to win the conference, and they've largely been living up to those expectations. We value these teams very similarly, and we're surprised that Troy is not slight favorites here on their home field. Appalachian State, they've definitely been leaning more on their defense this year, with their offense being slightly less consistent than you'd like to see out of a prohibitive favorite and a veteran team like App State. And then you have Troy, who they only have 1 defeat this year, and that came on the road against Clemson. And in that game, Troy was nearly able to upset the Tigers, which is pretty amazing. And if they were able to pull off that upset against Clemson, it'd be really interesting to see where the Trojans would currently be ranked as an undefeated team with a top resume win against one of the top teams in the nation. But anyways, that didn't happen for Troy, unfortunately for them. But they're still looking like a pretty solid bet to potentially finish things off and win the Sun Belt Conference. And, behind their home field advantage, we do think that they have the better betting value here right now as a pick'em. Auburn and Georgia, you have the Auburn Tigers, who have looked like one of the most improved teams in the nation from where they started the year to where they are now. A lot of that has had to do with the quarterback situation kind of figuring itself out for Auburn, and also the fact that the Tigers have been leaning a lot more on their ground game and not putting so much weight into leaning on their quarterback play, which has not been very good over the last few seasons. And then you have Georgia, who opened up the year on a really bright note with their win over North Carolina, but they just haven't been able to live up to the expectations that were put on this group after that strong opening result. And it's really surprising that Georgia hasn't been able to have more success on the ground this year, given the fact that they have 2 of the better running backs in the conference with Chubb and Sonny Michel. So we're kind of surprised to see that out of Georgia this year. The Bulldogs were able to get back on track a bit last week, getting the win on the road against Kentucky, which is actually a pretty nice win for them considering the kind of success Kentucky's been able to have in conference. So getting the full 10 points at home, we do feel like Georgia has the better betting value here, especially considering the fact that Auburn's a more one-dimensional offense, and Auburn has also shown that sometimes they struggle to score, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Tigers get things going here on the road against this Georgia defense, but we do think that the Bulldogs have the slightly better betting value here, getting the full 10 points at home. Moving down to another SEC matchup, we have Kentucky versus Tennessee. We've been pretty high on this Kentucky team coming into conference play, and they've really been quite consistent actually at covering the spread, especially in SEC play. Kentucky came up just short last week at home against Georgia, but again, not a terrible result for this squad. When Kentucky's been able to lean more on their ground game, they've had quite a bit of success this year in conference. And given the talent that Kentucky has in the backfield, I'm surprised that they don't lean more on their running game just overall. And then you have Tennessee, who's been a huge disappointment this year, consistently coming up short from their expectations on a weekly basis. We were actually pretty high on Tennessee coming into the year, but they haven't even been close to the team we thought they could be. And then obviously having Jalen Hurd out hurts their chances here. You can see the spread's gone down from -15 to -12.5. Kentucky's really been a consistent performer for us, and we are going to be siding with them again here, getting this many points on the road against a very inconsistent Tennessee squad. And then we have another SEC matchup here with LSU versus Arkansas. We were really high on Arkansas last week, getting quite a few points at home against Florida team that we felt was a bit overrated, and that definitely came to fruition as Arkansas went on to blow out the Gators at home. And we think that this Arkansas team is definitely a lot better than what Vegas has generally been pegging them at this year. And then you have LSU, who they have a pretty solid defense, but their offense has just been far too inconsistent for our liking, and especially what we saw to the Tigers last week on their home field, not being able to get any points on the board against Alabama. That's just not a great sign for them in their offensive confidence. So getting the full touchdown here on their home field, we definitely feel like Arkansas is a solid bet. Going over to the Pac-12, we have Stanford versus Oregon. We were pretty low on Stanford coming into the year, and even though they got off to a pretty decent start, they've had some results this year that were just really head-scratching in terms of getting blown out, and they could have similar issues here. Even though Oregon has really obviously vastly underperformed this year, this is still an Oregon offense that can be pretty tricky to defend. And then Stanford on the other side of the ball has just been one of the weakest offensive teams in the Pac-12, so even if they are able to get a lead here against Oregon, the Ducks will almost certainly have a puncher's chance at the backdoor cover here on their home field. So we feel like the Ducks have the advantage here, getting the points on their home as the better value bet. Now we have an independent matchup here with Army and Notre Dame. The book's been written about Notre Dame this year and how they've been obviously a huge disappointment. And then you have Army, who started the year just unbelievably amazingly in terms of performing above expectations, but they've been a bit more hit and miss ever since we left the month of September. Army is coming off not the greatest result in their last outing against Air Force, and we're interested to see how this Notre Dame defense responds this week. Obviously having not the greatest success in their loss against Navy last week, going against the triple option, but perhaps going against a triple option team for the second week in a row, the Irish will have a bit more success potentially. With that said, Army's recent win on the road against Wake Forest was a really great result for them, and Army has shown this year that when they go on the road, they have been able to perform pretty well. So we think that getting this many points, the Black Knights have the betting advantage here, and if we could get it up to 2 full touchdowns, we'd like it even more. But just based on what we've been seeing out of these teams this year, we do have a little bit more confidence here in Army getting all the points. Moving down to Miami versus Virginia. Miami, they've been a bit up and down this year, but part of that has had to do with the schedule they've gone against. We felt really strong in Miami last week at home against Pittsburgh. That was one of our higher confidence bets going into the week, and that came to fruition for us as Miami really went on to dominate Pittsburgh at home. And then you have Virginia here, who's obviously they've struggled to get consistent wins this year. The state of their program has not been so great in recent years, and it's hard to tell if this team is really heading in the right direction or not right now, but this spread has gone down a little bit. which makes us like Miami even more coming to this one, just giving 10 points right now. We do feel like Miami should have quite a bit of success here offensively against this Virginia defense as they go on to win and cover the spread on the road. Now to talk about Cal and Washington State, you have a Cal team that's been pretty consistently putting up some strong numbers on the offensive side of the ball this year, but just defensively they've largely been unable to hang with teams in the Pac-12. And then you have Washington State, who got off to a really slow start this year, losing their first 2 games of the year, but they've won every game since then, and Washington State just completely dominated last week in their incredibly brutal blowout win over Arizona. And that has to feel good for this Washington State squad, as they were able to put up huge numbers, not only with their starting quarterback in, but also the second unit was able to put up some huge numbers too. We're pretty high on this Washington State squad right now, and with this going down, if we get this down at about 2 touchdowns, that'd be even better. But even where this spread currently is, we do feel like Washington State has the advantage here. All right, we're getting kind of down here on the list. We've got a handful of games to talk about yet. Next we got USC versus Washington. Southern Cal really looked strong again last week at home, and that's been pretty much the calling card for USC this year. They've really had some great results on their home field, but they've been much less consistent away from home. And then you have Washington, who they've gone back-to-back on the road in Pac-12 play over the last couple weeks, picking up some really nice wins, and now getting back on their home field. Washington will be looking to make a statement here in front of the national audience as they try to put together a really strong performance, to show the committee that they're definitely worth being in the top 4. So we look for Washington to really put up a strong result here as they go on to cover this moderate spread. Going down to Boise State against Hawaii. Boise State has been a pretty consistent winner this year, there's no doubt about that, but they also haven't been very impressive at times on the defensive side of the ball. Even though their offense has been a pretty consistent performer, we are not nearly as high on this Boise State defense as Vegas probably has them at. And then you have Hawaii, who has a pretty strong home field advantage. Obviously Hawaii pretty inconsistent with their results in conference play, but they have shown the ability to compete in the Mountain West Conference at a respectable level, even though last week the Rainbow Warriors were outmatched pretty heavily by San Diego State. But San Diego State's more of an outlier in terms of the general overall talent in the conference, especially when going on the road. That could be really difficult for Hawaii. Bringing the Broncos over to the islands, we do think that if Hawaii is able to get their run game going a bit and kind of milk that clock down, they should have a pretty decent chance at covering a spread of this size on their home field. So we do like the Rainbow Warriors here, getting the points as the better value bet. Moving down to the Big 12, we have West Virginia versus Texas. West Virginia obviously disappointed with their defeat that came against Oklahoma State a couple weeks back. Really knocked them out of the playoff contention. And then you have Texas, who's really been a tough team to figure out this year. They've been a bit inconsistent with their results. The Horns have looked a bit better recently, but still that's been more on the offensive side of the ball than their defense hasn't been the greatest. This West Virginia group should be able to kind of pick apart this Texas defense, and that should be a difference maker here as the Mountaineers go on to cover this spread on the road. Another Big 12 matchup, we have Baylor versus Oklahoma. Baylor, we haven't been all that high on Baylor this year, given the fact, obviously, the head coaching change in the offseason, and then it just seems like there's a lot of drama right now surrounding this Baylor squad, which is never great when you're trying to get a team focused on the task at hand. Baylor just was embarrassed last week, even though we thought Baylor had a pretty good shot against a TCU team that's been consistently overrated this year, but that just wasn't the case, as TCU had their best showing this season, really blowing past Baylor team that's confidence right now has to be pretty low, coming off some pretty rough defeats in recent weeks. And then you have Oklahoma, who's been putting up huge offensive numbers in conference, and even though their defense hasn't looked all that great at times, with their running backs probably coming back for this one, we do think that Oklahoma, if they're able to get a pretty big early lead, should kind of break down this what appears to be a pretty mentally weak Baylor squad right now, and that's probably part of the reason why this has gone from 13 to over 2 full touchdowns. But even still, we do think that Oklahoma giving the points is the slightly better value bet here. All right, Vanderbilt and Missouri. We have one of the less interesting SEC matchups here. We've been really low on Missouri all year, and their offense has just been pretty terrible. And we have a hard time seeing this Missouri offense putting up much fight here against a Vanderbilt defense that's actually pretty adequate. Obviously, on the offensive side of the ball, that's where Vanderbilt tends to struggle, but the Commodores at the very least should be able to keep this game close, leaning on their defensive strengths and perhaps even push for this upset. So we do like the Commodores here getting the points against a Missouri squad that we're just not all that pleased with at this point in the year. South Florida and Memphis should be a pretty fun Conference USA game to watch this year, given the fact that both of these teams know how to put the ball in the end zone. We've really liked this South Florida team this year, and they've pretty much lived up to our expectations in terms of how we thought this squad would perform, especially on the offensive side of the ball, where they really have shown the ability to put up some pretty strong points or numbers, even though on the other side of the ball defensively they've been a little less consistent. And then you have Memphis, who last week really far surpassed expectations, blowing out SMU on the road. Really great bounce back win for Memphis, given the fact that they hadn't been looking all that impressive in some of their recent defeats in conference play. We're still higher on this South Florida squad, and right now, giving a manageable 3 points, we do feel like the Bulls have the slight betting advantage here on the road against the Tigers. Moving down to Michigan against Iowa. So Iowa coming into the year, obviously one of the favorites to win the conference coming out of the Big Ten West, but the Hawkeyes haven't even been close to living up to those expectations, which is kind of surprising given all the success Iowa was able to have last year. And the Hawkeyes did bring back a number of important cogs from that team, but they just haven't been able to replicate the kind of results that they showed us last year. And then you have Michigan, who's shown that they can consistently blow out teams, more specifically on their home field. The way Michigan played Michigan State on the road has us a little hesitant here, given the fact that Michigan State isn't even quite the kind of team that Iowa is, and Iowa has a pretty strong home field advantage, and their fans should come out quite a bit and support the home team here, given the fact that they're going against one of the top-ranked teams in the nation. We do like Michigan to pull out this win, but giving this many points on the road, we do feel like Iowa has enough to at least keep things respectable, much like Michigan State was able to do when we liked them on their home field, giving about 3 touchdowns in a similar situation. So we're going to be siding with Iowa in the points here as the better value bet. All right, so I just have 2 more games here on my list. First is Colorado versus Arizona. We felt strongly that Colorado was going to take a step forward this year, but they've even far surpassed our expectations. And kind of surprisingly, the Buffaloes have shown that they can win, maybe not the most pretty games, which they haven't been able to do in recent years. And that's been a big difference maker in them being able to work their way up the Pac-12 standings. We still like this Colorado offense, and even their defense has shown at times that they can put together pretty strong results. And then you have Arizona, who's been a complete catastrophe, but Arizona is looking a little bit healthier right now, which should give them a boost. We would like Colorado in this one if some of their recent wins weren't so ugly, and then going on the road, you never know quite what can happen in the Pac-12. Arizona is just trying to get back in the win column, not just for their head coach, but for their fan base, which has stayed pretty loyal to them this year. Giving this many points on the road, we do think that Arizona has the better betting value here, even though it is a little risky given the results we've seen from Arizona this year. But let's also not forget this is the same Arizona squad that was able to push Washington into overtime at home about a month or so ago. So this is a squad that does at least have the potential to put together a decent performance on their home field. All right, so one more game here. We got San Diego State against Nevada. We're not very high on this Nevada squad, and especially with Tyler Stewart, their starting QB being out, that hurts their chances here. San Diego State, they had a period, during the non-conference and early conference play, even where they were a little less consistent than you'd like to see on both sides of the ball at different times. And they've seemed to work things out, especially defensively. They've been absolutely dominating teams in the Mountain West Conference, and we see them doing that again this week on the road against Nevada, really probably limiting the Wolfpack to rather minimal scoring. And then the Aztecs should be able to lean on their strong run game to control the clock and milk things down, especially when they get a large lead. So we do think that San Diego State, even giving this many points, is the slightly better value bet here on the road. All right, guys, so that pretty much does it for this week's action, which is week 11 in college football. I don't know, I probably covered about maybe 25 to 30 games or so. I'm not exactly sure how many, but those are just kind of my take on a healthy handful of some of the games that we got this week. I'm pretty excited to see some of these matchups, and even more so than that, I'm extremely excited to getting ready for the college basketball season, which starts on Friday of this week. I've read completely cover to cover through the college basketball Blue Ribbon Yearbook, which, you know, I'm not sponsored by them at all, but if you're looking for a source that has just tremendous amount of information on all the college basketball teams, I highly recommend it. It's, you know, it's about maybe $25 or so for the book, and it just goes extremely into depth about all 350 college basketball teams. And if you're looking, or if you have the time, or you know, you're looking to get more information on some of the teams that you might be betting on, I really recommend them. They're pretty amazing that, you know, they're able to release that every year and have it be such an affordable price. But yeah, anyways, I'm really excited to use the knowledge that I hope to have gained out of reading all that and applying it over to the spreads that are going to be coming out here in a few days. So once those spreads come out in college basketball, I'm going to be writing all the picks that I have set up for Friday's action, and then I'll be making another one of these videos, except instead of college football this time, it's going to be for college basketball, and I'll be releasing those again more on a daily basis, since college basketball is pretty much going to be every day from this Friday all the way through March. So really, really excited about that. So if you want more pick content or write-up articles and matchup analysis beyond just what I talked about in this video, and, you know, kind of getting the lean on some of our more highly confidence plays, you can head over to stumpthespread.com and register a free account to get our free picks, or you can also register a premium account, which has all of our highest confidence plays that we tend to personally bet those particular plays over anything else. Those are our best value plays, and they win at a pretty high rate. Definitely been profitable over the long run. I know last week in college football we went 5-3, and I believe over the last 3 weeks in college football our premium bets have gone a pretty respectable 16-7 overall. So we're pretty happy about the profits we've been making in some of the recent weeks here. So again, if you're on desktop, I'll have a link right on this Stump the Spread logo that you can click on. Also, subscribe to the channel to get notifications of when I release these videos. It just makes it more convenient for you to access the content, especially right when it comes out, before some of these spreads change. And that pretty much does it for this video. So thanks, guys, again for watching. I'm really appreciative to all the support we've been getting in terms of likes on the videos and number of subscribers. It's pretty overwhelmingly positive, and we're just really appreciative of that. So thanks again, and I'll see you in my next video, which is going to be for college basketball for Friday's action. So I'll see you in that video, and have a great day. Bye.